Genesis 28 and 29. So Moses is still up on the mountain, and he's hearing the instructions from God about how God is going to be with his people. Last week we read the patterns or the blueprints for the tabernacle, the tent where God will dwell. And this week we read the instructions for the priests, their garments, and then their consecration. So this is all about God being with his people. The priests, you're going to see in a second that the priests are an integral part of the tabernacle. In the description that we get, it's not even like you can delineate between the description of the tent and the description of the priestly garments and their role. These two things kind of blend together. And the idea of the garments is that the priests are a part of the tabernacle. It's their uniform that they wear when they go to the tabernacle. Now, the idea about priests in general is that priests are intermediaries. They function in the space between God and people. They are meant to bring God to the people, and they're meant to bring people to God. And we get a description here of the high priest's garments. Now, someone has commented that the high priestly garments are themselves an inside-out tabernacle, because the most elaborate part of the tabernacle were most close to the center. And you remember there's white linen curtains on the outside, and then when you get into the middle, everything's gold and blue and rich. Whereas the most elaborate parts of the garments were on the outside, and the most basic stuff was on the inside, closest to the priest's body. And so the undergarments and the things that are closest to the body are white linen, whereas as you get to the outside, to the breastplate and to the medallion that's worn on the head, these things are made of precious gems and gold. The point of all of the garments is to designate the priests for the job of the priesthood. They couldn't just turn up to work in whatever they were wearing, and if they forgot their uniform one day, they couldn't do the job. They needed the garments to do the job. The garments are, like I said, an extension of the tabernacle. So let's have a look at this picture of all of the different aspects of the garment and walk through them bit by bit. We'll start at the top and go clockwise around. So firstly, we have the gold plate. Now the gold plate was on the forehead of the high priest. Sometimes it's called the medallion. It says on it, "Holy to Yahweh." It's a reminder that the role of priest, the intermediary, the intercessor, they play a specific role, and they have been set apart or consecrated for that role. They are holy to Yahweh. The high priest has a unique position in that he is able to bear the guilt of others, and that's something that cannot be done by anyone else. Now, interestingly, that is why one of the reasons why Jesus is described as a high priest, because he bore the guilt of others. The second piece on the uniform is the breastplate of judgment, or in the NIV, it's the breastplate of decision. This breastplate has 12 gems on it, 4 rows of 3, and the 12 names of the tribes of Israel are written on the 12 gems. So each tribe gets its own gemstone. And it's there so that as the priest enters the holy place, he bears the names of the sons of Israel over his heart as a continuing memorial before Yahweh, to remind God that he has made a covenant with these 12 tribes. The reason that it's called the breastplate of decision or judgment is because the Urim and Thummim go in this breastplate. And now these were probably gems, and they were used for decision making by Israel in the same way that lots were cast to help people make decisions. But these gems are God's designated way for Israel to determine the will of God. It's very fascinating. We don't know much about these stones, but they were the way that Israel would determine the will of God in their decisions. And the reason that God did this was because he wanted the knowledge of the will of God to be centralized at the tabernacle, so that not just anyone could go, "Oh yeah, I think God thinks we should do this or that." No, he wanted it to be centralized at the tabernacle. The next thing we have is the embroidered sash. Like I said before, the outside was the most decorative, and so this is a very decorative sash. It ties the ephod together, And then we have the linen coat. We have the linen undergarment. This I find very funny. So Aaron and his sons, it says, must wear these undergarments, these essentially underwear, whenever they enter the tent of meeting or approach the altar to minister in the holy place, so that they will not incur guilt and die. If you decide to not wear your underwear with these clothes, you could die. Just as Adam and Eve had been clothed after the fall, so any exposure of your genitals in the Lord's presence, it was strictly forbidden and could result in your death. So the pomegranates and the bells are the next thing. So these were hung around the bottom of the ephod, and there was a tradition that the law of God is like a pomegranate. About 613 laws in the law of God, and they say 613 seeds in a pomegranate. I've never actually checked to see if that was true, but that's what they say. And the bells are interesting. We're told that Aaron must wear the bells when he ministers. The sound of the bells will be heard when he enters the most holy place. The holy place, sorry, not the most holy place. And when he comes out, so that he will not die. It's a reminder that there is danger in approaching God. It could result in death. And the bells add to this sensory experience of the whole thing. Then we get the robe of the ephod. This is a blue robe, and it was made of expensive material. You get the ephod itself. The ephod was kind of like an apron. It went over the shoulders and it was tied around the waist in the way that an apron was. You get the stones of memorial in settings of gold. So these again are the names of the 6 tribes of Israel written in birth order, 6 on one shoulder and then 6 on the other shoulder. And you get the shoulder straps, and then finally you get the linen turban, which was worn on the head, and it was made of white linen. So they are the garments. They are, as I said, a demonstration that the priesthood is an integral part of the way the tabernacle functions, to bring God to the people and to bring the people to God. And then we're given a description of their consecration. I won't go into the details of this because we're running out of time, but yeah, it's a long process to set aside and consecrate the priests for the work that they will do. They are cleansed with the blood of the animals that are sacrificed, because blood functions like detergent in the temple, and we'll see that as we keep going. And this is what God does so that he can dwell with his people. It's pretty amazing. The lengths that God went to dwell with his people. And it is a reminder, like I said, that Jesus is, for us, our high priest. He is the one who brings us to God, and he is the one who brings God to us. He is our high priest. He bears our sin on our behalf, and he can do so because he is a high priest. Have a good day.